One of the most intriguing questions in all of sports is, what if we took our best athletes and allowed them to take whatever substances they wanted to maximize their performance? How much faster, how much stronger, how much better would they really get? Well, powerlifting is probably the only sport where we can actually answer that question based on real data and not just speculation. Because of powerlifting having a very open, untested side to it, in the history of the sport, there's been a few cases where top-level IPF lifters have made the transition and switched over, turned to the dark side, so to speak. And when I say top-level lifters, I mean world champion, world record level lifters. So literally the best of the best on the tested side. And that's happened on 3 occasions. There have been 3 IPF world champions and world record holders who have made the switch. In this video, I'm going to go through those 3 lifters and check out what their best numbers were before and after the switch. And the results may be a bit different to what you're expecting, especially with the last guy that I'm going to talk about. So I'm doing this in chronological order. Okay, now before we start, I have to get a quick disclaimer out of the way. This video is not pro or anti-PEDs. It is not meant to encourage nor endorse their use. It is also not meant to judge the lifters in this video or to view them in any negative light. All I'm doing is presenting the facts of what their best numbers were in the IPF and outside the IPF. Okay, cool. Now that my legal team is satisfied, we can get into the video. So the first lifter is Yury Belkin. So he was a 2014 IPF world champion in the 105 kilo weight class from Russia. And he held the IPF and overall 105 total world record for quite a while. For over 2 years, he had the world record for the biggest 105 tested total. Then following the year after, so in 2015, that's when he made the move into the untested side of the sport. So he went out on top on the tested side, decided to try out his luck and push his body to its maximal strength limit, I guess you would say. So first, I'm going to examine each of these lifters' body weights. So Yury Belkin, before he made the move, he was a 105 lifter, and he weighed in anywhere between 100 and 103 was his typical weigh-in range while he was a tested IPF lifter. So he was either cutting more weight than he needed to, or more likely he was just walking around at that weight, which I believe was the case. Now, when he went over to the untested side, his body weight didn't change all that much. So on the untested side, the weight classes are slightly different, but so he competed in the 100 and the 110 kilogram weight class. And he weighed in anywhere from 100 to 107 kilos. So again, his body weight pretty similar. Now his body composition, I'm sure, would have changed pretty dramatically. I can only assume that he was cutting more weight than he was before to get down to the 100 kilo weight class when he was competing there. However, I don't believe he ever got too heavy. He was 107 at that Big Dogs meet in 2019, which didn't have weight classes, so he wouldn't have cut for that. So he obviously didn't walk around that much heavier. Okay, on to the lifts. So Yury Belkin's best squat was 315 kilos, and that's what he did at 2014 Worlds in his IPF Worlds winning performance, 315 kilos. It's crazy that now that's the 74 world record is higher than that. It's crazy how much the sport has developed in the last decade. But his best squat, when he transitioned over, 420 kilos. Now, yes, this was raw with wraps. So I discussed in a previous video the differences between sleeves and wraps. But wraps alone aren't going to be adding over 100 kilos to your squat. So Yury Belkin's squat definitely got a hell of a lot stronger at not a significant gain in body weight, which is kind of wild. So yeah, he definitely got a lot out of the squat. That 420 was done in 2019. That was the Big Dogs meet that I mentioned, where there was no weight classes. He was just competing against guys that outweighed him by like 60, 80 kilos and to see who could total the most. I believe he finished 3rd at that meet. But he actually opened on 420, which was a PB. And then he loaded 1,000 pounds for his 2nd and 3rd, the absolute madman. But yeah, huge jump on the squats there. Onto the bench. Yury Belkin's best bench was 215, also done at the 2014 IPF Worlds that he won. And his best bench post dark side, I guess you could say, 240 kilos. So he did that in 2018 at the Kern US Open, which was a huge untested meet back in the day. So he added 25 kilos, which is over 10%, so not insignificant. And 215 still is a very high level bench press in the 105s. So Yury Belkin, as much as he's known for a deadlifter, which we'll get into why in a second, he actually always had a very good bench press as well. And to add over 10% to an already elite level bench, pretty impressive, 240 kilos. Okay, onto the deadlift. Now, Yury Belkin was definitely known for his deadlift. It was his best lift. His best lift when he was an IPF lifter was 347.5. Now, this was actually done at the Russian Nationals in 2014, I believe. So right before he won Worlds. So he deadlifted a bit less at Worlds, but that's the photo I could find. I couldn't find his actual 347.5. But after he moved over to the untested side, his deadlift shot up to 445 kilos, which he pulled at a deadlift only meet in 2020. So he got damn near 100 kilos. Now again, the difference here, you have a stiff bar in the IPF versus a deadlift bar in whatever untested federation that was at the time when he pulled it. And that is definitely going to add some to his lifts. However, of course, you're not getting 100 kilos out of a deadlift bar. So he did get a lot stronger. He also switched to hook grip. And yeah, one of the most aesthetic sumo forms. When I first got into powerlifting back in, those mid-late 2010s era, Yury Belkin was the John Haack before John Haack became the pound for pound king, basically. The real ones will remember that. But he was definitely known for that crazy deadlift, 445 kilos, absolutely insane. So if you look at his total, his best total in the tested side, 867.5, and that was from his 2014 IPF Worlds winning performance, and that was the world record that stood for over 2 years. 1,070 kilos is what his total shot up to. So he added over 200 kilos to his total without really adding any significant kilos to his body weight that he weighed in at. That is an insane jump. That was done in 2019 at that big dogs meet that I mentioned. Absolutely insane. So Yury Belkin got a lot out of the dark side, we'll say. Okay, on to the next one. This is probably the most well-known example of this happening. This is John Haack. So John Haack was the IPF World Champion in the 83s back in 2016 when he had that legendary showdown with Brett Gibbs that year. And in winning that, he actually set the IPF and overall world record, which stood for 2 years in the IPF and just under 1 year overall. Both cases was beaten by Brett Gibbs, who got silver that year. Then from 2017 onwards, that's when John Haack turned to the dark side. So the year after he won Worlds, he decided to, again, see how strong he could truly get with no limitations. So his body weight. He was an 83 lifter, and his weigh-in weights were between 81 and 83. So I don't think at the time he had a crazy weight cut, given that he weighed in, a few kilos below 83 a few times. So he was probably walking around quite close to that 83 mark, I would say. Now, when he made the move, his body weight went up quite a bit. So I would say there's more visible differences in his physique pre and post switch, more so than Yury Belkin. And he competes now in the 90 and the 100 kilogram weight classes. I believe he walks around close to 100 kilos or just a bit below 100 kilos. And then he does a cut down to either 90 or 95, depending on where he wants to be and how high he wants his dots to be, because he's essentially got no opposition. That's how good he is now. But yeah, his weigh-in weights recently have been between 90 and 95 kilos. So his body weight has definitely shot up quite a bit. And you can see pretty visible change in the amount of muscle he's now carrying, as you would expect, right? So his best ever squat done in IPF standards was done in 2016 USAPL Raw Nationals when he hit 300 kilos, which was at the time the world record, or the overall world record anyway. Now his best squat, 365.5 kilos. He now squats over 800 pounds which is nuts. That squat was done just last year in 2024, and he still squats high bar, which is mental. Man, he's, yeah, ridiculous strength. So he gained 65.5 kilos out of his squat. His bench, he's always been a strong bencher. His best bench was 200. That was done at IPF Worlds that year in 2016 where he won. And his best bench after the switch, 272.5 kilos, 600 pounds. John Haack is the lightest man ever to bench press 600 pounds in a full power meet, which is insane. Also insane is that he still has somewhat of a close grip. I mean, the guy squats high bar, benches with a close grip, deadlifts conventional. He's like the casual powerlifter's dream, right? But yes, lightest ever man to bench 600 pounds in a full power meet. Crazy. 72.5 kilos he got on his bench press. Insane. That was done in 2022. Since then, his bench strength has slightly dipped. He's still benching upwards of 250, 260 kilos, but he hasn't quite managed to top that 600 pound mark since 2022. Okay, so deadlift. His best ever deadlift was 320 kilos, done at 2015 USAPL Nationals, I believe. 426 kilos is now his best competition deadlift. 426 is ridiculous. So that was done again just last year in 2024 as well. And we mentioned before how John Haack's lightest person to ever bench 600 pounds in a full power meet. Well, guess what? He's also the lightest man to ever deadlift over 900 pounds. So the fact that he's the lightest for both the 600 pound bench and the 900 pound deadlift is crazy. He could also be the lightest for the 800 pound squat. I might need to double check that, but I wouldn't be surprised if he is. John Haack is, yeah, absolute anomaly and by far the best pound for pound lifter, untested lifter in the world right now. It's not even close, and ever as well. But yeah, 426, over 100 kilos he added to his deadlift. So if you add all that up to his total, 813 was his best total that he did at 2016 IPF Worlds, which was the world record at the time that stood for about 2 years. 1043.5 kilo total is what he is now on. That was a total that he hit last year. And similar to Yury Belkin, he added over 200 kilos to his total. So this is what can happen. We took the best lifter, the best 83 lifter in the world at the time, and ended up adding over 200 kilos to his best ever total. So yes, it definitely does make a huge difference, as you would expect, right? Okay, the next lifter we're going to talk about. Now, this is the one that may surprise you, and it's going to be a little bit different to the previous two, because out of the 3 lifters on this list, Krzysztof Wierzbicki is by far the most credentialed on the tested side, right? Yury Belkin and John Haack both turned to the dark side after winning their first and only world title, and then spent the rest of their careers on the untested side. Obviously, it's a one-way street. Once you make the move, you can never go back. Krzysztof Wierzbicki, on the other hand, is a 5-time IPF world champion in 2 different weight classes. He won 4 consecutive worlds in 93s, and then came back 2 years later to win a world title in the 105s as well. Not only was he a 5-time world champion, he also held the world records in both of those weight classes for a pretty significant amount of time. He held the 93 kilo world record for 2 years, from 2012 to 2014. And then he held both the IPF and overall 105 kilo world records for quite a long time. In the IPF, he held it for 4 years until 2021. And on the overall side, quite a long time as well. So Krzysztof Wierzbicki, if we're looking at the tested credentials, he is far and away, you know, better than John Haack and Yury Belkin were. That's just a fact. However, it's a bit different when we look at what happened when he switched over. So let's look at his bodyweight first. Obviously, you know, it's a bit hard to find a bodyweight range given that he competed across 2 different weight classes, but he was a 93 and a 105 lifter, and he weighed in anywhere between 92 and 102 kilos. So he never truly filled out the 105s. He was always he was a bit of a bigger 93, but around about 100 kilos is probably what his body weight was naturally. And it definitely didn't seem like he had to cut to make 105. Similar to Yury Belkin, when he transitioned over, he competed in the 100 and the 110 kilo weight classes, and the lightest he ever weighed in at was 98, and the heaviest he ever weighed in at was 107. So kind of similar to Yury Belkin here, where it didn't seem like he gained too many kilos after he, moved across, potentially up to 5 kilos. Obviously, body composition differences, potentially are there, but I mean, he's always had a mental front double bicep, even back in the IPF days. Okay, let's get into his squats. His best squat on the IPF was 310. His best squat when he moved over was 320. And this was also done in reps. And this is what I mean, it's a bit different to what we saw with Yury Belkin and John Haack. So what I will say about Krzysztof Wierzbicki though is he only competed, he turned to the dark side in 2020, right? So from 2020 onwards, he was on the untested side, but he only ever did 2 full power meets in those years since 2020. The majority of the meets he competed at were actually deadlift only meets, and he only ever did 2 full power meets. So these numbers, potentially aren't reflective of his true top end strength. So he went from 310 in sleeves to 320 in reps. And I mean, it's not inconceivable to think that the day he did 310 in the IPF, he could have thrown on reps and squeezed out another 10 kilos. So his strength, from those lifts alone, it didn't seem like he gained squat strength. I'm not suggesting he didn't. I'm just saying, he's only competed twice in full power meets since, so he hasn't had an opportunity to demonstrate what his true top end squat strength potentially is. What I will say though is Krzysztof Wierzbicki recently shared an SBD day with us on his Instagram back in October last year, and he hit a 332 kilo squat in sleeves. So that's probably a better indication of where he's at squat strength wise. Okay, bench press. His best bench in the IPF was 200 kilos. And his best bench after the move was 197.5. Now, again, I'm not suggesting his bench press strength went down. Like I said, he only had 2 chances essentially to beat his bench PB, and for whatever reason, he just didn't come together on the day. I believe he missed his 3rd attempt at around 205 at that meet where he hit 197.5 in 2020, but in that SBD day that I mentioned in October last year, he hit a 205 kilo bench. So his bench strength didn't go up a crazy amount, which again, pretty interesting comparing that especially to John Haack and even Yury Belkin. Okay, let's look at his deadlift. Of course, this is the lift he is best known for. He is, in my opinion, the greatest deadlifter of all time. If you haven't watched that video of mine, go check that out where I do the rankings, but spoiler alert, he is number 1. 400 kilos is his best lift on the tested side that he did in 2017, which still stands today as the overall 105 kilo world record. It hasn't been beaten. It was matched in the IPF by Sanchez Dillon last year, but it still hasn't been beaten. 8 years and counting this record has stood for. 447.5 has been his best deadlift since, and that was done in 2020 at 2021 in a deadlift only meet that he did, 447.5, and that was actually to beat the record of none other than Yury Belkin, whose 445 deadlift was also done in a deadlift only meet, and that was what we discussed earlier this video. So he gained upwards of 10%. Again, it has to be said this was done on a deadlift bar. He also did this hook grip, which is interesting because he's spent his entire career in the IPF pulling mixed grip. But yeah, deadlift bar alone is probably not going to add that much. He added an extra 10% to a number that was already so outrageously high. It still stands unbeaten 8 years later. So pretty impressive there. And like I said, the majority of the competitions he did were deadlift only when he made the transition over. So his best total, 900.5, best ever total as a tested lifter. That was in the 105s, of course. And afterwards, 941 at that similar sort of body weight. That was a meet that he did in 2020. So yeah, interestingly, pretty different to what we saw with Yury Belkin and John Haack. Now, I'm not going to speculate as to, how far into the dark side he turned, so to speak, or what he was using, what he wasn't using. Again, I'm not here to speculate. This is just pointing out the facts of the numbers pre and post switch, and who knows what he was prioritizing during that time. However, something else I have to mention: 502.5 kilo deadlift. Krzysztof Wierzbicki did. This was done in 2022, I believe, where he pulled the heaviest deadlift ever from the floor, more than Eddie Hall, more than Hafthor Bjornsson, and he did it raw without a suit. You can see there he's in a friggin' sleeveless hoodie. That's about as raw as you can get. Yes, it's with straps. Yes, it's on a deadlift bar, but it's raw, and it's still more than anyone's ever pulled from the floor. I will also mention a few other things. So that SBD day, he actually deadlifted 453, and that was with a hook grip, so it was completely raw comp standard. He later deadlifted 463, again with a hook grip comp standard, and narrowly missed 475. So he's seemingly over 1,000 pounds with a powerlifting competition style deadlift. And he's also pulled a pretty easy 470 with straps lately. And there's rumors going around that he's pulled in excess of 510 in training, or 510 or thereabouts in training, but he's not shared it with the world yet. So I don't know. I've been hearing whispers here and there that we might see a crazy announcement coming out soon. So who knows? That would be absolutely insane. But I wouldn't put it past him. I mean, he did pull 502.5, almost 3 years ago now. So, I wouldn't be at all surprised if he pulled 510, especially considering how easy the 470 with straps moved recently and how close he came to 475 with a hook grip, which is insane. But yes, the result of that SBD day in October last year was a 990 total. So if you go back to that total difference there, then 900 to 990 probably makes more sense, in line with what we would expect, especially based on what we saw with John Haack and Yury Belkin. So I'm not suggesting that 941 is his top end strength whatsoever. And I cannot wait to see if he actually pulled a 510 deadlift. I'll definitely have to make a video on that because it's absolutely crazy. But there you go. Those are the stories of the 3 lifters who went from being the best in the world in the IPF on the tested side, turned to the dark side, and these were the numbers pre and post. You can draw whatever conclusions out of that you want, but these are the facts.